Well,
I'm gonna monitor the phone in case anybody's having any trouble logging on, but I don't know. I don't think so. Nobody else has logged on. I know a couple people were planning on doing that. I know Laura Harmon was going to.
I know Cynthia wanted to be here.
Oh yeah, she messaged me yesterday. I was going to get back to her.
So do you guys meet monthly?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi. We're one of the few chapters in Tennessee that meet monthly. I mean, some
Yeah.
of them meet
Yep.
a couple of times a year.
Yeah.
But we meet monthly, and it's kind of the same. Actually, it's the same group that comes every week, really. We had Peter Mack. We had Peter Mack do a session, and we had who else do we have?
We had Sharon from the University of Michigan. I don't know how to say her name.
Oh yeah, Sharon Sue Sahin.
And we're having somebody do. My accountant is doing a session for us next time. But we had somebody else. We had Peter Mack.
Yeah.
Who else?
Remember, I wrote the checks, but I can't remember who the first one was.
Well, Peter Mack is so entertaining. I
Yeah.
tell you what.
I know he is. Yeah. So I have to follow him. Oh my goodness.
Well, you're entertaining too. So
Yeah.
are you at the conference in Atlanta doing your job that you did last year?
No, we actually aren't going to Atlanta this year. We're not going to be there this year. So we toyed around for a long time whether to go or not, and we decided with all the extra stuff we're doing that we're gonna it's with Dimitri being gone, we'd better not do that this year. There are a couple people who just came on, or one person.
Laura Harmon.
Oh hey Laura.
Hey, Laura. Rachel should be here.
Hey.
Hi, you're loud.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
It's
I
okay.
made it.
And you have an infectious laugh, so you'll get us started off on the right track.
Oh, good.
Oh, I see the sun shining too.
Yes.
Hmm. Hmm.
And you're gonna get, you can go to Starbucks. That's about it. You'll cash the check and go to Starbucks, and that's about what it is.
Oh, you're talking to me? Oh, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter at
I
all.
think I sent. Did you send me your address? Oh, I've
I
got
did.
your address. I've got
I
it.
did send you your address.
Hey.
Happy birthday.
Oh yes, is it today? It was just yesterday. Oh. Should we start? It's 11 o'clock.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I'm going to introduce EL, but I think EL is well known to everyone. EL and his wife Gail are kind of household names for all of us piano teachers. He has over 400 either authored or co-authored publications, and we know the Alfred Premier piano series and the Music for Little Mozarts, and of course the adult group piano that Mailing uses and Unsuk uses at UT, and you do too. So it's such a well-known group piano series. I think the best thing that you need to know about him is he was born in Tennessee.
Okay.
Yeah, in Dover, Tennessee. Now, actually, I'd never heard of Dover, Tennessee, but it's north of Clarksville, right?
It's north. You know where Tennessee goes up and juts into Kentucky?
Yes.
And that's where Dover's in that little area, and they the what they always said when I was growing up that the reason they have that little part jutting up into Kentucky is that when they were surveying the state lines, that the surveyors had too much to drink at that point, and and it was because in the county where I grew up there were lots of moonshining,
Yeah.
and that's why they ended up having this weird line at the top of Tennessee.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great story. I thought it was a good story too, and I want to tell you that his bio is over here. If I read all that, it would take the whole time for his presentation. But I love the story that I read online that he would go to his grandmother's house and she had a piano and he would play on the piano, but he played cluster chords, and he said he knew that all the adults there would want him to stop. He just loved playing the piano, and his grandmother gave him the piano, so that's how he started piano.
Nice.
Well, so that's the reason you went to Murray State was that you were up there near Kentucky.
I did, in my last 2 years of high school, I studied with a teacher at Murray State.
Did you? Okay, Murray State, Illinois, University of Illinois, and then he got his PhD at Northwestern. And so, wait, I wanted to say one more thing. Oh, my brain. What was I going to say? Can't remember what I was going to say. But anyway, we're excited to hear this presentation. We heard him at the state conference. I know at least two of us heard, or three of us heard him at the state conference. He's a wonderful presenter. Oh, I remember what else I wanted to tell you. When he started was it at Murray State, you were going to be a music ed major with piano as your principal instrument. And he decided he didn't want to teach in schools because his pedagogy class that he took, he just loved it. And so that was what geared him into pedagogy. And he set up the master's and doctoral program at Oklahoma, which is probably the premier pedagogy program in the country. So we're going to listen to the best. So, go ahead.
Thank you, Faye. And I actually met Faye, I believe, when the Suzuki books were revised, and Alfred, when I was at Alfred that time, and they had the Suzuki committee that revised them, and Faye wasn't on the committee, but she was obviously very active in the association, and I was to be the I guess the liaison between the publisher and the committee that was doing them. And I'm not a Suzuki teacher. And of course, Mary Craig Powell, I knew Mary Craig Powell before that. And I went to the first committee meeting, and the other people didn't know me other than Mary Craig. So I was a very suspicious entity at that first meeting because I was telling them all the things you couldn't do when you added an addition. So, and then I got to know Faye through that. I'm absolutely delighted to be here, and I was delighted to be at your conference. And here's what I always say when I do a workshop. I hope that you'll get one thing you can take home and use this afternoon. I always felt if I went to a workshop and I just got one little thing that I could do this afternoon, it was totally worth it. And you have your handouts, right? That to follow along. I'm going to share my screen and get the handout up. Let's see. Give me just a second. During COVID, I was very used to navigating Zoom meetings like this, but I'm not as used to it as I used to be. So here we go. We'll see if this works. Okay, hopefully you can see the handout, just see where you were, and we will be basically just going through this handout. As I said earlier, before some of you were coming in, we were chatting. If I did the whole thing, it would probably be 3 or 4 hours, and I know we only have about 50 or 60 minutes in this thing. At the convention in June, if you look at part 1, I did a whole session on how technologies impacted piano teaching. And when I do a session like this, I kind of gear my things as to what's on my mind, what's on our mind about the teaching profession. And on that, I wanted to say that I believe that technology has impacted not only our lives, but piano teaching, more than probably anything else. We used to always say, oh, those sports, they interfere with piano teaching, and sports still do interfere with piano teaching in some ways. But you know what? Technology is what's going to affect us more than anything else. I put a list there, and underneath there's a book that I recommended at the state convention. And I don't know if any of you have read this book, but it's not about music at all. It's called Generations. It's by Jean Twenge. She is a psychology professor at San Diego State University, and she's done massive amounts of research on how the various generations, and she focuses so much on how technology has impacted us. And just look at that list of things that I've talked about. Television. What did it do? If you're old enough, if you're at my age, which probably most of you aren't, I remember when there were only three channels. ABC, CBS, and NBC. And I remember when color came into TV. What did television do? It allowed us to experience events immediately. What happened, according to her research, when television came, there was a decline in reading. Home appliances, what did that do? Microwaves, washing machines, refrigerators. It allowed people to live alone. It allowed people when they got out of college to go get their own apartment. It it allowed women to have a career. We don't think so much about that now. I tend to think, women and men are equal in careers. I hope everyone's thinking that. There was an increase in leisure time with all those home appliances. What happened when there came air conditioning? The population in the South and the West got larger, and fewer people socialized outside. People began to stay inside more, especially in those hot areas. What happened when the birth control came? There was a lower birth rate. That also allowed women to pursue careers. And these are all the things that she says in the book. This is not my knowledge. But then computer technology, what happened then? There was an increase in skills and the education needed for jobs. Who in the world is going to know what kind of education we are going to need with virtual reality and with artificial intelligence? I don't even have any idea where we're going with this. And I've been taking the university where I teach has been offering seminars on artificial intelligence and how it's going to impact teaching. The bottom line is no one knows how it's going to impact teaching, but it's somehow going to impact us, I know. Then there was the internet news, instant access to information, decline of newspapers, ability to filter the news to your preference, and with the computer technology and the internet, we are seeing things happen like people publishing their own music, ability to publish your own music, a lot more things that you order online. Social media, you can reach a large group of people really fast. There's less face-to-face interaction. I heard the story how the youth orchestra director, where our kids were in the youth orchestra, came to dinner this week, and she told us that once COVID came back, that the kids in the orchestra did not know how to relate to each other, and that she actually brought in a consultant who worked with them to get them to interact with each other. So I think that's an interesting thing. Then there's mobile phones, there's artificial intelligence, there's virtual reality. So we're all dealing with that. Uh, okay, so with that in the background, I only start with that because I think every day, how's it going to affect our profession? I mean, what's happening with the younger people in our profession. MTNA is, really working to get younger people into the organization. I read somewhere that younger people are very hesitant to join groups that require membership. That a study was done that they really like to go online for everything. They don't have that need that many of us have had to have face-to-face interaction, like at your meetings or like at our national conventions. Okay, part two. Just want to, hopefully from this little section, I just sat down and I thought, what are some of the practical things that I have done that you would enjoy? Instead of clapping or tapping, we usually think, oh, let's clap this rhythm, let's tap this rhythm. Sometimes I've changed it and I said, let's play this rhythm on one key on the keyboard. Let me pull up something. That's not what I wanted. Sorry about that. Give me just a second. Here we go. Here's a piece that I have a feeling most of you know in some form or another. I'll tell you the way I worked on this piece recently, not too long ago. When I first introduced it, I said, I want to look at the rhythm that in the first two measures of the right hand. And I want us to explore that rhythm for just a minute. And I said, instead of clapping that rhythm, I want you to find the first note, and I want you to play that first note, but I don't want you to use finger 5. I want you to use finger 2 on that at this point. And I just want you to play that D with your second finger and just play the rhythm of the first two measures and count it. So they obviously played. No, really not that interesting, but it allowed me to isolate and focus it on rhythm. Now let's clap it. Now let's tap it. Now look at that rhythm once again. Can you find that rhythm somewhere else in this piece? Oh, okay, so you found it in measures 3 and 4. Can you find it somewhere else? Okay, so they found it down in measures 9, 10, they found it in measures 11 and 12. Okay, let's look at this rhythm again. And let's stop after the first beat. Can you, first beat of the second measure. Can you find that rhythm that stops on the first beat somewhere? So what do? They look at measure 5, they stop at measure 6. They look at measure 6, they stop at measure 7. They look at measure 8, they stop at measure 9. So I'm really focusing a lot on rhythm on that particular thing. Okay, let's look at my second bullet point. What's another thing you can do? Play one hand of a short section and tap the rhythm on the other hand. So I could play the right, let's just say take the first line. I could play the right hand of that and on my lap tap the left hand part that's there. That kind of helps a little bit with coordination. I've done this a lot, but I don't suggest you do it with a long section. I suggest you do it with a little section that needs some work on getting hands together type things. And I really actually think of that second page of the arabesque where there's parallel motion, if you remember the top of that, and it's all the same rhythm. But I've used that a lot right there because that's such a difficult place to coordinate. My third bullet point on the number 2. How many of you have asked your students to play a scale with one finger? So many times you'll hear a student do this. No, that's not right. No, that's not right. I finally have that. I finally have the right notes that are there. But I ask my students before they ever play a scale to play it with one finger and play it up and down. You know, we have this tendency, I think I've been guilty of this, and probably many piano teachers have been guilty of this, that we tend to do lots of things ascending, but we don't do as many things descending. I many times ask my students to play scales like this. Instead of going up and down, I go down and up because I think it requires a lot of different fingering like that. Why do I have them play it, the scale with one finger? Just to make sure that they know the exact keys that are in it. Could you play the G sharp harmonic minor scale with one finger? I mean, they for us as an advanced pianist or teachers, you know, those are important things to do too. And in working with music majors at the university, they have a hard time actually doing that type of thing. Do you ask your students to say scale fingerings aloud? Yesterday I taught my first keyboard musicianship class for this semester. And lots of times on the first day of class you don't do a lot of things. But I said we're going to review. This was the second level, and I said we're going to review scale fingerings. I want you to think scale fingerings for C major scale in the left hand. Let's say them aloud. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. Going back down. Ready, go. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You will save a lot of trouble working with students learning scales if you do three things. Have them say the letter names of the scale before they play it. Have them say the fingering before you play it. Have them play the scale with one finger, and then put all of those things together, and it will help with everything. Okay, I want to try one thing with you. We talked about G sharp harmonic minor. I want you to think about the left hand of that. And you can do this out loud if you want to, or you can just think it yourself. I want us to say one octave G sharp harmonic minor, left hand. I want you to say the scale fingering with me. Ready? Ready, go. 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3. Going back down. 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Can you do it? I mean, that's, and I'm not asking if you can do it, but I want to know if, can the students actually do that? Sometimes, going on down that list under number 2, I might ask the student on that first phrase of the minuet in G major, I might ask them to come up with some words that would help solidify that particular rhythm. I don't have one to think of doing that, but I sometimes do that to help them with a rhythm. Okay, next one. Do you play your theory examples on the keyboard? I mean, I have to tell you that as a student, in my first, I think Faye maybe told you I went to Murray State, or maybe we were talking about that before the Zoom actually started. But my freshman theory class, this will date me, but I don't know if many of you remember the old McCoe's theory book. And that whole theory book was 4-part writing. And I thought, we've spent this whole semester or the whole year doing 4-part writing. What does this have to do with music, Because I wasn't playing any 4-part writing in my lessons. I was playing it in church hymns, but that was about it. And so I think obviously when we're doing theory, playing it on the keyboard actually relates it to music. The other thing I like to do, we all teach and I like to have students when they play this, and let's do it in the left hand. I like to have them say the fingering. 5, 3, 1, 5, 2, 1, 5, 3, 1, 5, 2, 1, 5, 3, 1. Sometimes I have them do 5, 3, 1, 5, 2, 1, 5, 3, 1, 5, 2, 1, 5, 3, 1. The other thing I like to have them do is when they're doing chord inversions, that's where they really get fingerings messed up. So I do this 1, 3, 5. Then I have them say 1, 2, 5, 1, 3, 5. Coming back down 5, 3, 1, 5, 3, 1, 5, 3, 1, 5, 3, 1. If they can verbalize it, they will know it. Finally, and the last little tip I'm giving you here is something for you to think about. I have to admit that when we were talking about I went to Murray State, I went my junior and senior year in high school to study with a teacher there and ended up going there. When I went to study with him, I'd had wonderful teachers who made me love music and probably are responsible for me being here. But he was the first real teacher that really made me focus on details in my music. And I went for my lessons and I could sight read anything almost. And I didn't care what fingers I played with it. So I'm sure I was a nightmare of a student for playing fingering. And so consequently, as a teacher, I've really focused on that, is fingering correct? If I had a student that I knew had bad fingering, one of the first things I would do when I introduced this minuet in G major, I would have them take one each hand and I would have them go through and play only the note that had a finger number on it and make sure that they can play that note with the correct finger. So here in measure 5, and make sure they could play the C with the 4, the F sharp over in measure 7 with the 2 going to a 1. That really calls their attention to the fingering. And I do the same thing with the left hand. So, all right, let me get out of this thing. I'm going to stop my share. And, all right, going on to number 3. The word wrote is a 4-letter word, and some people love it, some people hate it. I've ended up doing a lot of different rote teaching, not just to avoid them reading, excuse me, not to have students avoid reading, but for really 3 different reasons that come to mind first. I like to teach musical concepts using rote. I like to teach theoretical principles using rote, and I like to develop technical skills using rote. Let me just share a couple things that will help with that. I'm going to screen share again. Here we go. And let's see here. Give me just a second. Okay, I want to take that one down. Take this one down. And I'm going to share my screen. So you're not seeing what I want you to see, but you're about to. Okay, here's a little piece, and we're in part 3 of the handout now if you're following along. And it's a little piece called Major to Minor. And in the book From Rote to Note, you get several things. This is what the student would see when I introduce it to them. It shows them where the left hand is, where the right hand is. it shows them that finger 3 plays both the E and the E flat. Now let me do this for you. There is also a written out example of this piece. And there is a little teacher guide at the bottom of the page that kind of gives you one way that to introduce it. Now, let me go back and kind of talk you through how I do this with a student. And this is the whole idea of that they're working with 5-finger patterns, and they're changing 5-finger patterns from major to minor. Just listen to it. I have my students play this in any key. Play it in D major, play it in A major, play it in A flat, whatever. So that's the way, instead of having them do this, I'm making them memorize this little piece, and I make them change it to any key that I want them to play it in when they're working on 5-finger patterns. Now, someone said, oh, that sounds like Kabalevsky clowns. Boy, it sure does. But it's just changing that third to be a minor third instead of a major third. How do I introduce it? I would show them this example. What do I need to tell them? Notes above that middle line are played with the right hand. Notes below are played with the left hand. Then what do? I have them follow first the first line and just play it as slow as they need to. Easy enough. Then I play the right hand of measure 5 and 8 and identify the intervals between the notes. So we're using a finger 2. What's the interval going up? It's an interval of a fourth, but it's with finger 5 and 1. Let's go to the key of E and do that. Yes. So you'd be starting with an F sharp on the 2, up a fourth. So you can see how I introduce it kind of piecemeal. Then I do the entire right hand so that they've got it. I do the left hand, I identify the intervals. We're obviously going an interval of a fifth here. We have an interval of a second and an interval of a fifth again. I play the hands together first, let me see, just a minute. In measures 1 through 5. I play only the notes that were hands together. Measure 1, measure 2, measure. They actually see that it's the same thing. It's the C and the E, the G and the E flat, going back and forth. So I work it through so that they get that and they have the whole thing memorized. So that's a little idea of where I have them play 5-finger patterns rather than just playing 5-finger patterns that are there. Okay, I want to go on and look at another piece. Look at this piece. It's a piece called Midnight Chase. And it says at the top of the page that the right hand plays all white key chords. Well, let's go look at those right hand chords. There you see a chord, F major. Let's go on and there it is again, the same F major. Let's go down to E minor. Let's go down to D minor. Oh, B diminished. Okay, an interesting type chord. So we find all those chords. We stay on the B diminished. We go up to C, up to D minor, up to E minor, up to F. So that makes it really rather easy for them to do, especially because it's on all white keys. Now, what happens with the left hand here? The left hand plays an A and goes up a fifth, goes down to G, up a fifth, down to F, up a fifth, down to D, up a fifth. So I actually then have them do that left hand part, leaving out the chords. But let me do one other thing for you right here. Let's see if I can make this happen. No, okay. Got to do, I'm going to stop my screen share for just a minute. And I want to change my camera for you. Okay, you can see my keyboard, right? Okay, here's the chords that you're starting with. Here's the interval of fifth that you're starting with. Note that the thumbs are on adjoining white keys. So I have them play a fifth in the left hand up to the next white key and play the chord without even looking at the music. Can you move down to the left one white key? Sorry. Can you move down to the left one white key? Can you skip a key and move down? Are your thumbs still on adjoining white keys? Can you move up, move up, move up, move up? That actually prepares them then to play the piece. Let me go back to my screen share for just a minute. Okay, let's see here. All right, so then you end up with a really easy piece because you have look at this part. You're right in place to play those E's in both hands. Let me do it one more time. And you're in place to start the third line. And then you end with the A and go down to the very lowest A on the keyboard. What do I use that for? To just focus on intervals and focus on those chords. By the time they've learned all that, they really have a fun little piece if it's an elementary student that they can actually play. And it says moderate rock tempo, but I can tell you what I've done with my students is that I actually have them work on speed for this piece because it sounds like a little toccata if you really work on speed and move it up. Okay, I'm going to share one other thing with you. And this is on the second page of your handout. This is a piece that many of you have taught. It's the Etude in A minor by Ludwig Scheidt. Here's what it looks like in notation. Why do I use that? Why do I use this piece? Because remember I talked about a lot of times that we play things going up, but we don't play things going down. I want them to get used to playing those chords going down. What is my purpose for this? When they do that, they've got the pattern that just goes. Then they have to deal with chord inversions. I often tell our music majors at Cal State University where I teach that probably in the future, and this is me projecting, that probably in the future the most important thing that you're going to be able to do is to play chord symbols. How many people want to play in a jazz band? How many people want to play in a praise band? Are we teaching students to read chord symbols? I believe that is a really important thing. I was talking to a teacher you know, actually, Faye and I were talking about the number of people who major in piano these days at colleges and universities. And I was talking to a teacher, a relatively young teacher, who had maybe in 30s and had started teaching in the 20s. And he said to me last week in a conversation, he said, I've been teaching for 15 years and I've never had a piano major, someone going to be a piano major. And I said, the important thing is that you sent them out into the world to enjoy music and to like music. And I think a lot of times being able to read chord symbols, even for those people, is going to be really, really important. So I'm not going to go into this. You would know how to teach it, but I just think it's important that we are dealing a lot of things with chord symbols. I want to share one other thing with you. I want to get out of this and I want to go back to my handout if it's still there. Give me just a second. Okay, I'm going to do this. Okay. You can see the handout, right? Okay. The last page of your handout, which I don't have here, I gave you, I'm sorry, it doesn't seem to be there. I gave you a sheet on page 4 that you can take home and use with a student. And I'm going to get out of my screen share for now. Okay. I'm going to change my camera so you're looking at me. Okay. Unfortunately. If you look at that handout on page 4, and I just pieced this together for a student not too long ago, and you can feel free to take it and use it because, we always say everyone needs to be able to go to a party and play Happy Birthday. So you can use this with a very young student. So I'm asking them, and you can see it's just handmade. To create a lead sheet arrangement of Happy Birthday, and it tells them that they use 3 chords. It shows them those 3 chords. It gives them 3 practice points. It says to first practice the melody with the right hand, which is an obvious thing to do, and the melody's down below. And then with the right hand melody, play the bottom note, the root of the chord in the left hand on beat 1 of each measure. Probably the easiest way that they could play Happy Birthday at their friend's birthday party, just to put the root of the chord there. They never have to move the left hand. And then I said optional, create an arrangement that uses root position chords. And I showed them, I wanted them to leave off the top note of the G chord. You know why? Because they're going to run into each other if they don't do that. And I always tell my students, you can always throw the 5th away, because it's not going to affect the sound that much. So if you want to teach the student to play Happy Birthday, this is the type of thing that I often do. This sounds horrible, but I'll say it anyway. If a student comes to a lesson and hasn't practiced, you probably don't have any of those, but every once in a while you get those. I like to do things, pull things out like this. We can always say, oh, we're going to have a practice lesson. And it's fine to practice some things, but I remember, practice lessons sometimes are very demoralizing to students. Because, it's like you're reminding them I haven't done what I'm supposed to do. So pull out things when a student hasn't practiced that much, like this. Let them work on it. Pull out things like those rote pieces. Let them learn a little theory. Work on a little technique with them. make them, leave being really, happy with what they're doing. So that's part 4, and talking about lead sheets. Now I have this whole cycle of stuff that I use then following up on lead sheets, and let me see if I can show you those. I'm looking through, put it up for you. Here we go. I'm going to share my screen with you. Okay, here. Okay, why do I use this piece? Look at the chords used in this piece. They're all root position chords. It's an easy one to use. I won't play the whole thing for you, but I always like to start early on with pieces that use root position chords. Then I move on to pieces like this that I'm getting there. Mamma Mia, and it looks like on our iPad that my wife has been teaching this too, because she's got a lot of red markings on there that she didn't erase before we made the PDF. But look at this sheet. It's now using only inversions, and obviously she was telling her students that you do the same chord if there's no chord written there when she's written those types of things out. So they're moving on to inversions. What's my next step? I go on to changing the accompaniment, where we're basically doing an Alberti bass. So I gradually am moving on to other things. Finally, the big thing would be to move to lots of things that use seventh chords. I put Killing Me Softly as an example, and I put there's another example called Fly Me to the Moon at that particular point. So I'm just saying, think about teaching lead sheets and making sure they can read them. It's going to be important to them down the road. Okay, part 5. We're on page 2, part 5 of your handout. I'll let you get there. Practice. Probably one of the most important things that we're doing is to getting students to practice on a regular basis. What do students do when they start practicing? They start at the beginning always, and they keep on going, etc. Here's some other options. You probably don't have any of these people, but do you have students who procrastinate and cram in their practice a day before or two before they come for their lesson rather than distributing it? I'm kind of a believer in a little bit of practice every day. I remember when our son was in high school and he was preparing his auditions for college as a percussion major. He was so busy in high school with all the courses and all the things that they have to do. We would just say to him, even if you're busy today, you've got to practice 15 minutes. And I always, when my students leave, I would always do this with my busy students. If you can only practice one thing, this is what you practice this week. If you can practice 2, this is number 2. This is number 3. This is number 4. I once had a student named Beth, and this is from a long time ago. And Beth has a PhD in musicology and teaches at University of California, Davis. And she I was a violinist and a pianist, and she said to me one time at a lesson, I'm playing for the high school musical. I'm playing piano for the high school musical. And she said, I'm not going to have much time to practice this week. Or she basically said, I'm not going to have any time to practice this week. And I said, well, do this. I gave her my list of things I wanted her to do in the order. If you only have a little bit, practice number one, practice number two. She came back the next week and she'd practiced everything. And I said, I thought you had the musical and you were going to be at the school every night until 11 or 11:30. And she said, well, here's what I did. My bedroom is upstairs. And I decided that every time I went upstairs to get something or any time during the day, that the piano is close to the stairs, that I would sit down and practice for 5 minutes. And I sat down and I practiced number one. I was amazed. She said, I was amazed at how many times I went up the stairs, and all those 5 minutes times kept adding up. So that was an interesting type thing. Interleaving practice. That's the second one you have on your handout. I don't know how many are using interleaving practice, but I recommend this to students sometimes, that they practice instead of just focusing on one piece or one section of a piece before moving into another piece. I ask them to identify 3 or 4 things that they want to accomplish. And I ask them to set a timer. And if they're practicing the first 8 measures of the Bach minuet, you practice that for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. You go on to the next thing that you're going to practice. Practice 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Go on to the third thing. Go back to the first thing. So within the same practice, instead of practicing that whole section for the whole hour or the whole half hour, set 10-minute segments and move to different things, but always come back in that segment to what the first thing that you were doing or the second thing that you were doing. And it sometimes helps the student. The third thing I put was chunking. We all do that. There's identifying similar patterns. We did that with the rhythm in the Bach that we talked about. The third thing I wrote was marking parts. I don't know if you have your students write in the form of the piece when you're talking about it, but I think that's always very important to write in the form of the piece. Mapping, create a visual map of certain things that helps the students identify passages that are similar, that are different. It can relate to theory. It can relate to all kinds of different types of things, but here's what I always do, especially with advanced students. If they're having a hard time memorizing a section, and I don't suggest that you do it for an entire movement of a Beethoven sonata, but if they're having a hard time memorizing a section, take that little 8-measure section and have them bring some kind of musical map back to you that's not notated. If they take the time to write that map and figure out what it is and analyze it, they will have that part memorized at that point. Okay. Then the next thing I wrote was blocking chords. There's nothing unique about that. But I always ask my students to practice their hardest part first. And oftentimes that means starting at the back of the piece. And but and I help them figure out what the hardest part is. When I introduce a piece of music based on the type of student that it is, I often introduce the hardest part first and just isolate that part before they ever go back to it. Building up metronome practice. Did any of you ever hear Ruslan Jinska play? You probably know who Ruth Slinchinska is. You know, Ruth Slinchinska is 99 years old. She just had her 99th birthday. At 98, she released a new CD in which actually, quite honestly, she plays pretty well on that CD, you know. And Ruth Slinchinska was a guest artist at my first teaching job. And I remember she came and she wanted to practice, and she had uh, a metronome with her, and she set the metronome at a very slow tempo, and then she moved it up to the next notch. She moved it up to the next notch. She practiced it at every tempo on the metronome from that slow one up to the performance tempo that she wanted. If you haven't read her book, Forbidden Childhood, you would probably only have to get it on eBay. But she talks so much about how her father pushed her and how she hated music. She talks a little bit about her study with Rachmaninoff. It's a very interesting read. Two other practice elements: focus only on rhythm at some point, focus only on melody, and do opposites. Opposite is an interesting thing, and that is where you take a little section of your piece and if it's played legato, you play it staccato. If it's played staccato, you play it legato. If it's played loud, you play it soft, and you mix it up just a little bit. I'm convinced that doing that helps memory more than anything else. But all of those elements that I'm talking about here are in the iPractice book that's listed on the bottom of your handout. It's probably the best book on practice that I know, because not only does it talk about using technology in practice, but it talks about all these various elements of practice technique. Okay, page 3 of your handout. I've got materials to explore, and these materials to explore are just basically books. Let me screen share some things with you now. Let me find the right thing. Here we go. And I'm going to put this one up too. I'm going to put all these up. Just give me a second to get everything up that I want to show you. And okay, now then let me screen share. Okay, you should be seeing a lot of different book covers up here. I want to get to this one. Here's my thing on these. I probably, you look behind at all these books that you see there, and that's only a drop of a hat of what books that we have. I'm one of these people that I buy a book and I think I've read it. So uh, I'm just always looking for new materials and interested in things, etc. Technique through repertoire. I just want to share you what it is. It's it's you know what an orchestral source book is, where they isolate little examples of things they have to play. To me, technique through repertoire is a source, an excerpt books for piano. And you can see they're divided into various categories. There are Alberti bass pieces, there are alternating hands pieces, there are articulation pieces. Let's look at the articulation pieces. So you see we're dealing with legato, phrasing, staccato, and there are little examples from different pieces that get gradually harder. There's the second page of it. Get gradually harder in various categories. You don't go straight through the book. There are pieces that deal with scales. They get gradually harder. It's probably early intermediate to intermediate type level. There are 2 books of those that you might be interested in looking at if you have not seen those 2 books. Okay, then I'm sure many of you have used Jane McGraw's book of let's see if I can pull it up. Piano Literature for Teaching and Performance. Let's see if I have it right here. And this massive book, Jane has updated in lots of different ways, and it's a reference book for you as a teacher. Anybody own that? Raise, if I can see your hand. Anybody can raise their hand on it? Okay, here I just showed you the section on Florence Price. Any book like this is obviously going to be outdated really, really soon, because after Jane did this, they discovered all that new music in that house near Chicago of Florence Price that's not even dealt with in this book. But it's really the Bible for really helping you choose repertoire. If you don't own that, I definitely suggest that you look at it. Okay, I've got a lot of books up here, so let's see what else I have here. The Recollections of Robert Wyrick. If you remember, Robert Wyrick wrote columns for Clavier, he wrote columns for American Music Teacher, etc. And he has collected those, and he has grouped them by category. And then he's done an introductory and I don't have a copy of it to pull up to show you. I thought I did, but it doesn't appear to be here. Let's see one more time. Okay. I read every one of those columns, but he's grouped them by categories, and then he's done an introduction to each one of those. So if you want something that's interesting reading, you don't have to read a lot at the same time. It's a good book to read. I'm going right down the list of your handout. The Pianist Bookshelf. A practical guide to books, videos, and other resources. Maurice Henson first did that. It's exactly what it is. It's by category. It lists books, it lists videos, it lists other resources. Here's the interesting thing. When I got this second edition, which is really, really new, you can see it's a 2024 publication date. I thought, oh gosh, we've got the internet now. Is a book like this outdated? But as I gone through, I thought there are lots of interesting things there. There were lots of dissertations, etc. Next book on my list, Weight in the Fingertips. A Musical Odyssey from Soviet Ukraine to the World Stage by Ina Falix. Do you know Ina Falix? Ina Falix is head of the piano department at UCLA. Her family immigrated from Ukraine when she was very, very small. She studied they settled in the Chicago area. She studied as a pre-college student, she studied with Emilio del Rosario, who was a very, very well-known teacher of pre-college students in the Chicago area. Elizabeth Joy Rowe of Anderson and Rowe studied with Emilio del Rosario as a pre-college student. Ina Falix gives her whole life story from getting out of the Ukraine to studying and to going through her university, from studying at Curtis, from all kinds of things. It's just a fascinating read about a biography. So if you want something that's very entertaining, she really goes very personal into that book. I'm not sure if I'd been writing the book that I would have told as much stuff about myself as she tells, but she's totally open. The next book, Playing with Fire, it's a book that I could not put down. It's about Maria Udina, who was a pianist during Stalin's regime in Russia. And, the artists were persecuted, and she lived a monk-like existence. She knew everybody from that time. She premiered lots of people's works like Shostakovich. She knew Prokofiev. I mean, she knew every composer in Russia. I could not put that book down. If any of you are in higher education and you're dealing with students who want to have a career in college teaching, the Practical Guide to Studio Teaching in Higher Education is a great book. The title is very misleading. It says A Practical Guide to Studio Teaching. It's much beyond that. It's the practical guide to navigating the higher education system in the music department, because it goes much beyond studio teaching. It's by Scott Watson and Jerry Young. Uh, Marvin Blickenstaff's Inspired Piano Teaching. I have here, I actually have a proof of this, and I have I got received this week, because I was I wasn't the editor. Peter Jutras was the line by line editor, but I was the conceptual editor. So here's a picture of the cover, and it's will be in print in about a month. If you've ever been to a Marvin Blickenstaff workshop, you have all of his workshops in a book. There you can see the table of contents. It starts with why we teach. It goes into foundational skills. He sets it up kind of cleverly. There's an exposition, a theme 1, a transition, a theme 2. Then there's a development section where he talks about the transfer students, talks about technique, a recapitulation. A recapitulation kind of talks about style and interpretation. So this book is not in print, but it will be in print. And I'm just flipping through. You can see some of the pages that are there. It will be in print in about a month, actually. And I think you can pre-order it probably on the Francis Clark website. Okay, I want to share 2 other books that I just got oh, by the way, here's the real book of Marvin's, because this is the approval copy. So I'm going through to see if there's anything weird in it before they actually print them all. So that's the approval copy of it. Can you read the title of this book? I don't know if you can or not. It's called Encyclopedia of American Classical Pianists. It is fascinating. It starts with A and goes through Z. I don't have it on the list because I just got it after the handout was prepared. And it has like 2 or 3 pages on each pianist. And then at the end, it gives suggested recordings by them. And if you want to read more about those pianists, it has further reading about those pianists. I end up, reading about 1 or 2 pianists a day, because, it's kind of my 5-minute rule that my student did. I do the 5-minute read of that book every day just to read about another pianist. Then I have one more book to share with you that I have to say I have not read. Can you see that? It's called House of Music, and it's by the mother of 7 British children, all who became musicians. Here's how I got that. I heard the Royal Philharmonic play, and the pianist played the Clara Schumann Concerto. The pianist was the oldest of these 7 kids, and I got totally fascinated by the whole thing. One of the brothers is a cellist, and I believe the cellist played for one of the royal family weddings. I don't know which one it was, or maybe it was. I anyway. I'm dying to read this book, so I had to share it with you to see what it's like. And the mother talks about raising 7 kids. Uh, is it close enough everybody can see and get the copy down? Hold it up. Uh, is that okay? Faye, I can email you the title, or Chris, I can email you the title and you can send it out. Why don't I'll email you the title. I'm
Who's the
sorry?
who's the author?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask that. I'm going to spell it. The first name is Kadiatu. Kadiatu. That's the first name. The last name is hyphenated. Kanneh. Kanneh hyphen Mason. Mason. She's the mother. And I haven't read it. I can't tell you if it's good or not, but it's fascinating to me. Uh, let's end today by doing this. I listed part 7 on your handout. Think about this. Even on your worst day, your students learn something from you. Every day you teach, you have your own personal piano pedagogy class, because I think most of us learn something from every lesson. Give your students a lot of what they want, a little of what they want, and a lot of what they need. So the little of what they want is what keeps them motivated. Piano students are like onions. They have layers. Keep peeling it. And just like the onions, sometimes our students can make us cry because really, sometimes you feel like crying because they've done so well. Sometimes you feel like crying because you think I've had a horrible lesson today. But just think of it like an onion, because actually I've had this, when we had a large independent studio when we lived in Norman, I had students that I thought I don't like teaching, but I kept working with them, and they became my favorite students, and they became the best students. So think of it that way. Uh, Here's the thing. The characteristics of some of your worst students sometimes are reincarnated in your own children. So I had to laugh because that was kind of a personal situation. End each lesson on a positive note. Tell your student at least one thing that he or she did well that day. I always feel like that students remember the first thing you do at your lesson and the last thing you do at your lesson. That's what they remember the most. So keep that positive note. You can't change the child, but you can change your approach to the style. Be flexible. Uh, and some stones with gentle polishing will turn into gems. Think of each student as a stone, and hopefully they'll turn into gems. Don't sweat the hard stuff. Everything's hard. With that, I hope you've gotten the one thing you can take home and use this afternoon. It's been a delight to be in Knoxville, although I haven't been there. I wish I was there to go down on the river and uh, have dinner at one of those restaurants that's along the river there. So anyway,
You have been to Knoxville.
I know, but it's been a long time. I have to come back.
Thank you so much. This was great.
It was my pleasure. I hope you don't get the bad weather you had last week again. I hope you have a great and happy and wonderful and prosperous new year. That's all we can hope for.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Same
Thank
to
you.
you. Bye.
Bye. Hope to see everyone soon.
Yes.
Bye bye.
Oh gosh, we forgot that. Oh, yes, we did ask him if it was okay,
Yeah.
and he said
Yeah.
fine. You know, I think we need to go out and get a loan to get all these food.
Maybe we can each buy one.
Well, do we have any business that we need to go over? I mean, obviously, today we learned that Lane Music is moving, and we are not going to have this space available for by the time of our. I think our next meeting we will still be able to meet here. That's February 16, something like that. Is that right?
Not February 16th. Yes.
So they said.
Live music club, they're moving next month, isn't it? So our meeting gonna be somewhere where?
It's. I think they're moving at the end of the month.
Near Coastal.
What's the third Friday? What's the number?
I think he say they moving near Costco to Farragut.